remembering the multidimensional capacity that we have as human beings, remembering the original blueprint held within our bodies, held within the heart of the earth, knowing and like feeling how much we have access to, how much we can see, how much we can feel, be in relationship with the mystery and the beauty that's held within the land and within each other. People were so like smart, brilliant in the mind, but in many ways people were very emotionally immature. You know, these teachers in the land, these trees, these mountains, they are also teachers for the emotional body.
Erick Gonzalez, welcome to Soul Connected. I'm happy to talk to you today. So, before we dive right in, tell me, if that was your first day on Earth, with your current state of awareness, what would you be most surprised about observing humanity today?
Um, I almost started crying because it's like, yeah, I think it's sometimes difficult to see the way that we are living, because one thing that I've been experiencing and remembering a lot more and more is remembering the multidimensional capacity that we have as human beings, remembering the original blueprint held within our bodies, held within the heart of the earth, knowing and like feeling how much we have access to, how much we can see, how much we can feel, how deeply we can be in relationship with not just the land on like a physical ecological level, but like to really be in relationship with the mystery and the beauty that's held within the land and within each other. And so like to just like see, and I always have this imagery of like walking into like a Target or Walmart or whatever store, and in the like soap and shampoo aisle, there's just like aisles and aisles of like
Mm,
plastic bottles with
yeah.
shampoo full of like chemicals and colors, and it's like just such a huge yeah, it's like a very big disconnect from our original blueprint and from the capacity that we have. And so I would feel very surprised.
Okay, so you would definitely feel the disconnection of the body that we're meant to live as human beings, that we were given by nature, by Mother Nature.
Yeah, the disconnection, I think, even from knowing like what our body is capable of.
Hmm.
Um,
What have you found the body to be capable of?
so I really like, and I don't have a lot of human teachers, so I've learned a lot directly from just spending a lot of time out in nature, spending a lot of time out in the land, spending a lot of time in wild places. And for me, it was like this slow deepening into the wisdom that's there, and also a deepening into the mystery. Because as I mentioned before, you know, at one point I think we can see the land and we can notice what it looks like, and we can notice the ecosystem, and we can start to gain all of this information that is like the scientific information, and that's like the forestry, and that's like the ecology and the interconnections. But then at some point there's like this deepening that happens where as human bodies we are not just scientific instruments, and we have this human mind. And I studied physics, so I really value the um, so physics to me is the deepest understanding of the natural world by the human mind,
The
in the
mother of
language of,
science.
yeah. And it's, I think, so beautiful what we can learn about nature from the mind. You
Mm.
know, we've learned things that are so beautiful that might never have been dreamed by human hearts, and yet there is also more. So we are also beings that have capacity for emotion, and the world of emotion is maybe probably actually like even vaster and bigger and deeper than the world of the physical. And when I was in this PhD program, one thing that I was noticing, even within myself, was that people were so like smart, brilliant in the mind, but in many ways, people were very emotionally immature,
Mm.
and people, myself included, like didn't really have a good understanding of our own emotions. And it's almost like emotions were just considered this, like, oh, they're not really real, they're just electrical signals in the mind.
But
And
that's not
yet,
untrue, but that doesn't make it less meaningful. When something is in the body or expressing through the body, that doesn't mean that the source isn't coming from a higher place.
yeah, and it's so strong too, it's like we can have emotions that are so strong that like will break us, whether
Mm.
breaking us in tears or breaking us in beauty. It's a huge part of being human, and also like a big part of this connection that we have. So as I started learning more and more, noticing how there's also communication that happens through the emotional body.
Mm.
And I think as we understand our own internal emotional landscape more and more, as we develop the sensitivity to those subtle emotions that travel through our body and hearts and spirit, then we begin to have the sensitivity to the external emotional landscapes and to all of the emotional landscapes and to all of the emotional subtleties that are held within the body of the land, within the mountains, within the trees. And these teachers in the land, these trees, these mountains, they are also teachers for the emotional body, and they carry very deep mysteries. And there's also the possibility of connecting to the ancestral realms and to our own ancestry, also connecting to the ancestry that's held within the land. And then we start getting different information through the body, through vision, through emotion, and we begin to really like recognize that as human beings we are so powerful and we are so capable to understand these the external emotional landscape and the interrelationships of everything and how we relate to it, and also receive the not just the mental nourishment of understanding the beauty with the mind, but also receiving the emotional nourishment of everything that's held with the land. And that's such a big part of the beauty that's here on earth, is that we have this like very deep connection through these unseen worlds, through emotion, through the mystery, to all of the teachers in the land, to all of our ancestry, and to the stars, to the earth. And it's really like a beautiful thing to step into that power and to be able to see in more dimensions than just the dimension of the mind.
How did you learn to read nature on such a deep level?
I really like Zen Buddhism, and I think because I was studying physics, I actually was in this part of my life where I was like very resistant to anything that was not like the physics and the math and the science, and almost thought that any of like the other things or like the spiritual things were just
Bullshit.
like, yeah, exactly. um, and so I really love Thich Nhat Hanh, if you're familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh or
Mhm.
not, but he's a Zen Vietnamese Buddhist monk. And for me, Zen Buddhism was nice because there was like nothing weird about it, nothing to believe. It was just essentially like learning how to be present,
Mm.
which I think is the most important thing. And so for me, it was, meditation, learning how to be present with my body, and then learning how to be present with the land. And that's the nice thing, is that the land just taught me, and if we're present, it will teach us. And maybe it's useful to have guidance, but we don't even need it necessarily. If we go out and we're present, and we're not like stuck in these constructs of
Mm.
the mind that we have, then and we all learn different things. I learned from like there's some specific places and specific elements of the land that really guide me. And I also learned that, I was for a very long time disconnected to my ancestry. And the teachers in my ancestry are the pine trees. Behind me is this beautiful ponderosa pine piece and the volcanic mountains. And so
How
I
did you
was
learn about
guided.
that? Did you know that on a mental level, or did you hear that from being in nature and listening?
That's a good question. And I also think that, this information that comes in different ways. Some people I think will like hear things. I don't really hear things. Sometimes kind of see things. For me, it's largely like very deep emotions that are felt. And then these visions come in as like emotion. A lot of times I'll cry. And then
Mm.
maybe there's like some visual imagery, but it's also connected to the mind, and we have the capacity to interpret and like use our full capacity and everything we know to understand. And so, but for me, I was born in Mexico City, and when I was 7, my family and I moved to Dallas, Texas. But Mexico City was the city of Tenochtitlan, which was the capital of the Mexica or Aztec. And outside of the city are two 17,000-foot stratovolcanoes. These volcanoes are the original teachers of the lineage. They are the living ancestors. As you get outside of Mexico City into the mountains, you get into these open pine forests
Mhm.
growing atop a volcanic rock. And I didn't know this, but I moved after finishing growing up in Dallas. I moved to Phoenix for graduate school, and then I left that program and moved just a few hours north to a place called Flagstaff, Arizona. And Flagstaff, Arizona is at 7,000 feet in elevation. It's the largest contiguous ponderosa pine forest in the world. It's one of the largest volcanic fields in the United States. There's volcanic mountains that stand watch over that forest. And for some reason, I always just felt so good there, felt so at home. It's one of my favorite places on earth. And then after living there for some time, I started to realize that, and actually, this is something that I received from one of the mountains there, like asking it a question that I had, and then realizing that, like where I was born, the landscape is so similar. It's volcanic mountains and pine forests. And these things that I realized that I was learning from the land, at one point I realized that these things were known before. I'm not the first person to receive them. And in how much we have all forgotten, sometimes it can feel like this information is maybe not new, but like maybe like no one else like is listening or understanding it or feeling it. But I really was realizing that, yeah, this was known, and it was even known through my lineage. There's also colonization, and that led to so many broken and fractured lineages on both sides, on the sides that were colonized and from the colonizer's side. Everyone, it affected everyone, and it disconnected everyone. But yeah, I just started to realize um, that I was learning from the volcanic mountains and pine trees on this land, who are also the same teachers of my ancestry, and so they have been helping me remember the things that were forgotten and the things that weren't passed down through me to me through the human lineage.
Do you think that it matters where we are born, that the landscape where we are born in kind of carries information about our soul blueprint, and maybe about our life path?
I think so, like I don't think it's everything, but it's the place that you emerged into this world from. And if we imagine, the land, it's like the land was um, like it saw you come into this world, like it saw you being born. these two volcanoes in Mexico. They stood watch as I was born, and they watched me grow up. And also, I think the land teaches us, as you know, as we grow up, as we're children, we are taught by the landscape and the land around us. And I even saw this, I was teaching physics in Flagstaff, and even if the students, I think they recognized it, and they recognized the forest, and people there, spend a lot of time in nature. But I could, almost feel like these children are being raised by the forest in a way. And so I think that has um, an impact. I think also, your ancestry, even if it's different from where you were born, you carry within you a lot of your ancestry. You also, carry that whatever connections are in your soul blueprint, um, whatever guides are present for you. Some people are very connected to, I don't know, like the ocean or whales or the stars, and so I think it's all of these things. I think where you're born isn't everything, but also like I think there is also a lot there.
Mm. How do you work with the ancestral line or lineage? Like, how do you tap into that, and what kind of information do you use?
I think a lot is held within the body, and a lot of the ancestral information and ancestral patterns, ancestral memory is like literally within our body.
Mm.
Um, you know, we all come from the womb, and there's this like line through the wombs of the women in our ancestry, and also we a lot of information gets passed down and encoded, both through the body and also through the mystery. And so I think when we begin to understand our body, begin to understand um, our history, our stories, the for me also the land helps me remember, because like I said, there's a lot of like fracturing in the information held within my ancestry and many other lineages.
Mm.
And so to me, like these volcanic mountains, like they are the living ancestors. These same mountains that are here now, they not they didn't just stand watch as I was born, but they stood watch as my parents were born, as their parents were born, as like many, many ancestors back, like many lineages back. They've stood watch and they remember. And so when we come to them and we ask them and we are present with them, they can also help us remember. And there's also a lot of for me, there's been a lot of like ancestral healing, because there's been so much of the like one specific thing is the trauma of colonization and everything that it led to, and even like the disconnect of and the like inversion of like the masculine and feminine energies, where um when the Spanish came, not only did so many of the indigenous people die, um, but many of the men were killed. Many of the women that had children with the Spanish, they were kind of outcast. Maybe the fathers weren't present. And so, even 500 years later, that still shows up a lot in many of the families in Mexico, in many of like the men not having had, good masculine like male role models.
Mm.
And
That's not only
but
the case in Mexico, that's everywhere.
everywhere, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had all the world wars, and I feel like we are just beginning to open up to a new chapter of masculinity, and it's just in the baby shoes, like we are just beginning to do it and to even discover what it even means. And I feel in my life it was the same, that most of us women are kind of pushed into being way more masculine than our nature would actually allow, or would give us our true potential. Because I think we are not the same. We are equal, but we're not the same. And everybody has masculine and feminine energy, but most of the time, well, often women have more feminine energy, but they haven't been allowed to live that energy for so long. And masculine energy has been misunderstood from my perspective for so many years.
Yeah, it's really so beautiful, the things that women hold, the things that men hold. Women are, I think, so connected to the mystery, and there's so many of these lineages and the priestess lineages and all of the women that have really like held this information, like have protected it, and I think women really like they are the ones like leading the expansion of the consciousness. They are the ones birthing, you know, every single person that has ever lived. Um, and then there's a really beautiful role that men play in that as well, really to like support that and to protect that and to nourish that. And yeah, I think it's for me it's nice how much that is coming back and how many um, how how many women have really stepped into that in like such powerful and beautiful ways, and how many men are remembering
Mm.
what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, how to like embody and step into the masculine gifts. And when we both do that as men and women, like then like life flourishes and it's in support of all of life and the world gets more beautiful. And so it is really nice that this remembrance in this aspect of the masculine and feminine is really also coming back.
Now, what do you think is the natural language of a healthy or even sacred masculinity?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of gifts in the masculine, and one of these gifts is to just be present. And the mountains are present. The mountains have almost a multi-dimensional presence. And I also think that this is something that I've learned too, is I think women are have remembered first. And there's, like I said, so many beautiful example of like these very like powerful multidimensional women that are connected to so much, that are really like embodying and expressing their multidimensionality and connected to all of the different unseen worlds, connected to their guides and guidance. And also for me, like remembering and recognizing that there's also really, I think, just of a strong multidimensionality in men, and it looks different, but men are also infinitely attuned to the subtle realms. And I think just like having the presence to be not just in the body, but the presence to be at the same time in all of those other realms,
Mhm.
and to just kind of stand watch and to be present and to be a pillar, kind of like the mountain stands
Mm.
watch on earth, not just in the physical, but in a multidimensional presence. Men also have this gift of physical strength, and the strength is here for us to be more deeply in service, to be protectors of what is sacred, to protect the women, to protect the children, to be rooted in presence and strength so that there can be ease um, around us. And so for me, those are some of the,
Mm.
yeah, kind of like the language. And then also, I think there's like, the whole brotherhood of like men coming together in brotherhood, and how powerful that is, as is women gathering together, in sisterhood. Um, yeah.
Do you experience these gatherings or brotherhoods? Do you have any community?
Yeah, I feel very lucky because at one point in my life, I had this thought of like, where are all like the other men that, like, where are all of like these other brothers that are also like really committed and like doing this work and really stepping into that embodiment. And I feel so lucky be to know and to be surrounded by so many good men, by so many strong men, by so many multidimensional men. There's a lot of really beautiful uh, and strong men here in my community, um, in Sedona that I know. I'm also, if you know Eisen, he has this fellowship group that's online, and there's, close to like 100 men from all over the world. And there's also like many other men's, um, groups and programs. I have a brother, Andre, in the UK, and he also, is leading some men's groups. And so, yeah, I feel, and it just like it strengthens me as a man,
Yeah.
and it's important for me. And so I feel lucky that that this like field is becoming more present. And I think as men, if we look for it, that we will find it.
And how do you feel you come together? Like you just described how a man could be in a relation to mother or the woman and the child, the structure or the protector. But if men come together, if they are aware and connected, like you say, and like you have found for yourself, what kind of community, what kind of energy and group dynamic do you develop under when you're just, inside your circles?
Yeah, so I think the two things that come to mind are, like as men, sometimes we also need support. And so for me, it's amazing to, this support is not just for women and children, like the multidimensional presence of a man. Um, yeah, this capacity to just be present, to be supportive, is also like available for us as men. And so it feels really amazing to just have such powerful, such deep support from so many men. And I think as men, it's also like it helps, when we're going through really difficult things, um, to not put these things on our romantic partners, or
Mhm.
on our female friends, to like have this like support of brotherhood that is so strong. And and I think for me, and I think for many men, there's this, uh, yeah, I feel so lucky because there's this level of vulnerability that can develop, where there's things that like there's things that I thought I would never tell a single other human person, things that I would like take to the grave because like they were so shameful, or they were so difficult. And to have, brothers where I've like told everything to, and I could tell anything to, like that's so healing to have that. And and I think the men are, like men are built to hold that, like I probably wouldn't tell these things to just like anyone. And so that's so beautiful and so important. And then also, men like build, and men also like physically build the new world. And so I think when men come together, we can also like create more, we can also build more, we can be of more service.
Mm.
um and so, yeah, those are just the two things that came to mind right now.
Mm. And if you shared those same things with a woman, what would be the difference? What kind of reaction is different in a centered man or in a centered woman?
I think it also like maybe it also depends on the context. I think in the context of like a romantic relationship, I think it's nice to not depend on, you know, a romantic partner for all of your emotional needs and support. And so having us a man, like a group of men where we can have that support and we can bring these things to, and we're not just like dumping and like having our partner be like have to play that role. I think that's important. um
It's
I
more like a
also,
sharing, not a containment.
what's that?
You mean in the group, it's more like a sharing, everybody's opening up and maybe even feeling equal, whereas maybe in a relationship or in a romantic partnership, people tend to take on responsibility or try to help, or maybe just even feel like a container for all the dumpster stuff that may be occurring in your life. So maybe this is a different feeling, like what you load onto people.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, not just like loading your romantic partner with all of the, like every time you need support, you know,
Mm,
um like that relationship is there for maybe for something else. And it's nice for a partner to not also take on the entirety of like the role of like some of
mm,
emotional support or
yeah,
therapist.
yeah.
um and then also, you know, there's also other things where I think, you know, many, because these things are being remembered, and in many ways they haven't been fully embodied in men for a long time. I think there's also a lot of like us men, like when we walk this path from like having all of these masculine wounds, um I think we go through this like phase of life where even if we don't want to, like these masculine wounds come out in ways that actually, like, you know, causes harm, like, or distress to like women or to our partners or in our relationships.
Can you describe
And
those masculine wounds a little bit more?
yeah, so, you know, even something as simple as like anger, you know, it's like if as men, like we um we haven't had the like strength of presence to like go deeply into like the inner dimensions of our emotions and into our inner child to like really feel the wounds that have been there. I think anger is like in a sense a very protective emotion. There's deeper things below the anger. And so um whatever, you know, if we're in that state, maybe we're in a romantic relationship, and when things get difficult or when there's disagreements, like maybe that anger comes out. And, you know, anger coming out in a like in a way that's not contained is harmful. You know, it's harmful to our partners, it's harmful to the people around us. And so uh even, yeah, something like that, or it's like, okay, as a man, like say I got angry and I started like yelling and throwing things, and then my partner was affected, and maybe the women around me were affected. Like if I were to then go to women to seek support for that, that's like almost putting more on the women. And
Mm,
so I think for things like that, like uh it's very like useful, and I think energetically like correct and sensitive to, okay, this is a deep wound that has already caused some harm, and instead of trying to fix it, and sometimes these things also are at some level like men like trying to fill, you know, trying to fill like a hole with the feminine energy. And
mhm.
so also going to the feminine to like seek help for that is maybe not like the most ideal thing. And so in because of these things and the level of support that men can have for each other, I think it's like a very good thing. for
Mm.
men to seek the support of men
Mm.
and do the healing with the men and like really explore these steps with the men. And
Mm.
like maybe things like have to continue to come out and men can hold that. And as men, we also understand because so many of us have done those things and have traveled these paths of, at first, like everything we touch like almost like dies because we have all these wounds. And even if we like want to like love someone or want to be present, other things come out.
Mm.
And so then as men, coming together to heal those things in brotherhood, and then we can like give the world like the results and the fruits
Mm.
of that healing.
So what you're saying is that either running away from your feelings or expressing them in a very destructive way is actually a language of a masculine wound.
Yeah.
Mm. And Erick, you know that there are many, many groups online in all over the world where young men also come together, but in a really big rage and in a
Mm.
destructive way,
Hmm.
and talking about humanity or the female population as if it were the devil.
Hmm.
So, what do you think is expressing itself here in these kinds of brotherhoods? And what do you think the world needs to heal that, to really stop the rage and the destruction and also the violence?
Yeah, I think, of course, like these wounds run so deep, and these wounds really, and they're by design, like designed to to weaken men and to make men weak and to make men step out of their power. And it's when men are stepping out of their power that these things happen, and this hurts men and this hurts everyone else. And what I think is so, and like even so two things that my brother Eisen I've heard say is anytime a man complains, that's like already instantly like you're stepped out of your power.
Mm.
You are not taking responsibility, and it's a very low frequency of complaining. And the other thing is, which I also think is the most important part of any like work that a man does, any like internal men's work. I think the most important thing is to take full responsibility. And again, this is something that my brother Eisen says a lot, of taking full responsibility for everything in your life. And that's powerful. And that's also the only way that we can really like change and heal. Because I think there's a lot of men that even if they're like, even if someone is saying that they want to change or they want things to be differently, unless a man is willing to take full responsibility for whatever is happening, for whatever the external circumstances of his life looks, unless someone takes full responsibility, then change is very difficult. And so, and then that strengthens us to take responsibility. Then we have the power, and um, and then change can really happen. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah, so when we look at young men who feel unworthy because they might
Mm.
not get the girl they want or the attention they want, that's of course a difficult step for someone who doesn't have a strong father, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't know how to take on responsibility for their own life and especially for their self-worth. Because I think for girls, it's the same thing. When you grow up, a lot of the self-worth comes from the question, how desirable am I? How beautiful am I? And runs for women as deeply as the self-worth question or wound runs for men or for young men. but it speaks a different language because when a woman has that wound, she's usually turning inwards and also more prone to depression and anxiety, whereas a man carries that wound most of the time outwards in violence or in addiction or in destructive behavior. So I think it's all coming down to the question of our self-worth. And in my opinion, women also have to take on the responsibility for their lives, in the matter of what do I let in? You know, what kind of space do I open up? And how will I, or who will I let fill in my space? Because, you know, to me, the feminine energy is allowance and
Mm.
creating space and also creating motion in that space. But the question is, what kind of structure or what kind of impulse do I let in? How do I discern what's in love
Mm.
or what's in confusion or maybe even a deep wound?
Yeah, I also like and appreciate you bringing that perspective of like the discernment of women, and I think that's so um yeah, I think that's like you said, or like we're or like I said earlier too, it's like when we take that responsibility, then we're in control.
Mm.
And uh and I also, yeah, completely agree with you on how, yeah, like, young men, uh if like a man doesn't feel whole, um and also like if he I really, like this, the not just the concept but the practice of like of initiations, for men, and uh an initiation like for a man like into his wholeness, also an initiation of a man like out of the child that, like, in a sense, like a child like needs the support and nurturing of his mother and the
Mm.
feminine. And then as a boy steps into a man, he has, within himself like the masculine and the feminine like in strong union. And as men, we're also connected directly to the earth, to the divine mother, like to all of this like uh feminine energy that's present for us and within us. And also an initiation into both like recognizing that wholeness within, which maybe like there's some move from like the fear or the sadness into that like embodied strength. And also the initiation of like all of the strength that a man has and all of like the energy, away from that like victimization and the complaining and like the blaming women and everything, into like the actual like embodiment of that strength, and of the using of that strength,
Mm.
um, to protect, to nourish. And there's yeah, I think, a lot of things um happen, like with men from the transition of boyhood into adulthood. And physically as well, like, like teenagers, like they're strong, like they're ready uh for more, and they're ready for more responsibility, and they're ready to like use that strength. There's also like all of like the just like the sexual changes and energy and like desires. And so like really like I think the practices of rites of passage and initiations, um and like having the masculine role models, so
Mm,
that
that's
we
so
don't,
important. Mm.
yeah, yeah, so
Mm.
that we don't fall into that like victimization of not
Mm.
feeling whole. And then
Mm.
uh yeah, and then the things that you described.
So, you know, sometimes in a relationship of two people, no matter what gender, there is also a quite big mix-up of who plays the feminine and who plays the masculine part. And what do you consider this to be when, for example, a man and a woman live together? And the woman is way more masculine in her energy and also in her everyday actions. And the man is way more feminine. Do you think that's something that needs to be discovered more? Like they both need to discover the other side more? Or is it just a different kind of creation that is to be enjoyed?
Yeah, I think, yeah, like I think everyone's different and people have different balances of the masculine and feminine energies. And so, yeah, things may look different for different people and in different relationships. And I also think that whatever, it is, like it's nice to like have the embodied, like, and the union of both energies that we hold. And I know for myself, I think in the past, I was like, in many ways, like, not embodied in my masculine essence and in my masculine energy. And it was easier for me to just like be more passive and like play more of a feminine role out of like just like the comfort and ease.
Mm,
And uh, so I think whatever, like, however things end up settling, it's really beneficial for us to like, especially if we haven't, to like really like feel into our masculine energy, to really feel into our feminine energy, to really like work through the embodiment of those energies in a good way. And then really like, really what I work with is like this, the templating of divine union and like the divine internal union within ourselves, of the union of like the embodied masculine and the embodied feminine within, leading to that wholeness. And then that can also be reflected externally.
mm.
And then once we are in union with that, however that looks like for us, then yeah, maybe it looks different for different people on the outside, but there's still like a very strong,
Mm.
like internal embodiment of both energies.
Do you believe in twin flames?
I don't really like, I don't really think so much about like all the different words and terms. So like twin flames, I have some connotations with that.
Hmm.
And but I don't really have like a
A
specific
concept.
definition.
Hmm.
And so I have some thoughts on that, but I don't know exactly what you mean like
Okay,
by
so
twin flames.
from my understanding, a twin flame is when a soul has already developed some kind of level of awareness. Um, the oversoul might decide to, well, the soul always incarnates in all kinds of dimensions and timelines at the same time. But usually the time-space construct is different. But when it reaches a specific kind of awareness to accelerate the union of masculine and feminine energy and also to dissolve duality more, it decides to send a ray or two rays or two flames into the same space-time construct. So they will meet, they will recognize, and they will initiate a journey until they find reunion inside themselves. And most of the time, then maybe also in the 3D. But it's usually a masculine and a feminine energy. It doesn't have to be, it's going to be a man and a woman, but it's very often is. And when they are in this initiation phase, they feel a very strong emotional pull to each other, but that is only to initiate the important life lessons and especially to integrate and heal the masculine and feminine wounds inside themselves until what you just said, there is an inner union of both energies.
Yeah, so I think I believe in that. I think some of my experience with like the twin flames and hearing that and just kind of feeling into that, um, I think it can be And I think there's also like, especially for people that are on a spiritual path, a level of from like disembodiment to more embodiment. And I often just feel, especially for men who are like still like not fully honest with themselves, not fully taking responsibility, not fully embodied, kind of like this, like almost like a fantasy with like, oh, maybe you're my twin flame, and
Mm.
having like this romantic fantasy of
Yeah.
like it's when in reality it's like, okay, it's coming as like a karmic thing
Yeah, it's a
from
karmic
two
thing.
people that aren't
Mhm.
like really like actually embodied. And
Mm.
so in that sense, like it is exactly what you described of like this initiation into embodiment. And it actually is like more of like a difficult, like tumultuous thing rather than like the fantasy that I think sometimes people
Mm. Yeah,
uh
I think it's very, very often misused for karmic or even trauma bonds with
mhm,
toxic relationship dynamics where one is always running and the other is always chasing. But I think what's definitely a difference is that a karmic partner, which is in the understanding that I have, a different kind of flame, a different kind
mhm,
of soul
okay.
essence, is really triggering your deepest wounds.
Mm,
Whereas the twin flame is mirroring your life,
mm,
meaning they always experience the same thing from the other side. While most of the time the feminine is experiencing a lot of the things inside, the masculine part is experiencing these things on the outside. And the challenge or the lesson to be learned here is to flip the coin. So when the feminine energy has mastered her inner state, then her outer life, her 3D life, is going to settle and going to be more in balance. Whereas the masculine needs to settle the outer life to come into this inner stillness of listening to the heart, of being centered in the heart. And usually what I heard about that, or even what I experienced myself, is that there is always a similarity in experiences and in life lessons. So most of the time, the feminine part has the experience at first, and then after that, the masculine part has the experience as well. Learning a little bit later, but that's also playing in physical life. A male brain is usually taking a little bit longer to develop than a female brain.
yeah, I think yeah, I don't. And one thing I'm curious with the twin flames, like I said, I haven't thought into it so much, but really, like what I think more of is just like the internal divine union and then the external divine union. Um, Once like there's a level of embodiment, not that people, will be perfect coming into these partnerships. And I also feel like how uh, divine union, like the really like embodiment of like embodied masculine in divine internal union with himself, and the embodied feminine in divine internal union with herself,
Hmm.
like when they come together, like that's the most powerful
Yeah,
force
yeah,
in the universe.
yeah,
And so that's most of what I like kind of spend my time like kind of thinking on and contemplating on. um and yeah, I haven't really like thought too much about like the twin flame
mm,
relationships and exactly how that plays out. But I feel like even I've had experiences like that where it's like been a like a deeply like initiatory
yeah,
experience.
yeah. And the purpose definitely isn't to be in a partnership
Okay.
necessarily.
Yeah.
I think you can see it in the astrological synastry, like what kind of role you play for each other in
Mm,
each other's awakening. And it might be on a mental level, it might be on a very external level, and it might be also on an emotional and sexual level. But what's very interesting about this is you're actually falling in love with yourself just
mm,
from the other side. You're just falling in love with the other part of you that is still to be integrated.
mm,
And the moment you have integrated that, it doesn't even matter if you're together or not, because it's already
Mm.
whole inside of you. Tell us about your current projects, your work, and how people can engage in your work.
Yeah, so I'm really in this process of listening to spirit, to listening to God, and like uh, discerning like what is of most service right now. The two main things that I work with, which really are one thing. Um, One is like uh, bringing back the wisdom of old, um, guiding us back into our multidimensionality as human beings, to connect deeply with the land, to connect deeply with our guides, to connect deeply with our ancestors, to remember the ancestral knowledge held within the land and our bodies. And so I have some programs in the works to work with me on that. And on the other hand, which again is just the same like remembrance, is working with men. Um, yeah, just like decided I'll be opening up one-on-one mentorships with men. We'll probably also put together some other ways of men for men to work with me. But the best way to keep in touch is on my social media on Instagram, which is Erick the Human, Erick, Erick the Human. And then if you from there want to get on my newsletter, I send things out there. Um, and so, yeah, those are like my main two projects right now. Is like the deep connection with the mystery of the natural world and also the embodiment of the masculine.
I've looked into your work and it seems so beautiful and soft, feminine, but also rooted in masculine embodiment at the same time. And if I were a man, I would join your group.
Mm.
You live in Sedona, which is, of course, a really spiritually charged place. And I imagine that you have tons of communities there who work together, who network. So excited to look into your work. And to me, it was a huge pleasure talking to you. I hope you had a little bit of fun too.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. It's such a blessing to have this conversation, both the conversation on like this mystery and also like the conversation on the masculine and feminine energies, and really honor you for what you're holding and for your vision and for having this podcast and for the path that you've traveled that allows us to have this conversation. So yeah, thank you so much for
Thank
that.
you so much, Erick. Have a great day and bye bye.
Thank you.